Okay. It looks a bit, let me just change the light a little bit. I think that's better. Okay. So just sit in and look for feeling comfortable in your chair as you do. Try and be a little bit forwards to give you a chance to feel a small amount, about a third of your weight forward. So you're slightly tilted forwards as always. Posture. Particularly in the standing postures, people like some people like to imagine themselves sort of hanging from the crown of their head. And you can still get some of that feeling, even though you're seated and you're slightly angled forwards. There is this sense of a sort of lengthening through your back and your spine. Before we go any further, just an exercise, an alternative looking away at this process of tightening and releasing that I've taken you through a few times. In some ways, this is simply just push your shoulders up, and then you can have your hands at your sides and just let your shoulders drop. Do that a couple of times and drop. The really good news here is that when you let your shoulders drop, they stop at some point. Your hands don't just go all the way down to the ground. So once again, what we find is when we release tension in the body, we still have a means of supporting ourselves. And then try the same thing with your hips and lower back. You won't get such a dramatic lift, but it's still quite interesting. You push up and then drop, sort of plop into the chair, push up and drop. And so again, we find that we get stopped by the chair, of course, but when we come to do this standing, there's no chair there. Again, you'll feel that sense of what I've described as an inner structure and inner strength, starting in and around the skeleton. And it's just an encouragement to release tightness and stiffness in your body. We often become very habituated to that. And we have an unconscious assumption that we need that. So it's kind of rediscovering that inner support mechanism, really. It's very simple, and it's worth doing that just to reinforce that, oh yeah, I've got a rib cage. I don't know about anybody else. I get up in the morning and I start to practice, and my shoulders up around my ears, my back stiff, and I don't need this. And it's quite a relief to let go of that. And you won't let go of all the tightness, but some of it will go. Now, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And then the other side. Upper part of the chest. Your belly. And your legs. And then into our second stance posture, which is the reclining posture, where we can, again, I mean, if you want to, you could try to tension your shoulders and then releasing, tension your hips, lower back, and releasing. And because you're sitting back in the chair and the chair is obviously supporting you, then actually it's a really good exercise. You get a sense of what changes when you release. Maybe you breathe in or feel in your chest or whatever. And we want to just recall these things at the start of the session so that they become part of a kind of underlying intent as we go through the different exercises. I mean, obviously, when we go through into the main body of exercises, some will be quite complex and the arms are involved. So we want to establish this ground state of being able to release tightness when it builds up. It will build up inevitably. And without having to sort of think about it too much. So this is where the intention comes in on a kind of intuitive level. And if we can spotlight certain qualities that we want, then that actually helps that process. And of course, one of the key features is going to be this sense of feeling heavier, your weight dropping. We don't want to carry our weight on our shoulders. So coming back up to the upright position, feeling that your legs are able to support some of the weight of your body. That's where we get this sense of angling forwards on the side, a very slight angle. So if you imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, your feet and your hips form the four corners of a square. You're moving towards the middle of that square, probably not all the way, probably about a third of the way forwards. And with this slight angle in back, and it's a tilt from the pelvis. So it's not this. You can see here, I'm hunched over, my back is bent. What it is an angling forward, so my shoulders stay more or less in line with my hips. And the front of my body, belly, solar plexus, chest and ribs, can hang slightly. So try not to pull your belly in. Notice whether you're kind of, again, just habitually holding on to tightness in your chest. And we start to get this sense of space. There is space for all the metabolic processes, with the flow of energy, you've got your breathing, circulation, will all benefit from this reduced amount of tightness within the body. Now, beginning to turn your head very gently, and we want to maintain that feeling that there is space within the body. So if I turn my head too far, there's a pull in the side of my neck. So I just go to something like 80% of the distance. So as I'm moving, I'm encouraging this flow of movement of energy through that part of my body. And then the shoulders. As we come into moving our arms in space, our elbows circling around. Notice what's going on in your front and your sides and your back. And in particular, I think chest and upper back can be highlighted by this exercise. So if I exaggerate, it's almost like my chest goes forwards, my back and sternum doing this. It's got that kind of thing. It's much more subtle than that. You'll find that tightness in your body blocks these connections. Go back the other way. But we're just partly recognizing, for those of you with more experience, that there is a connection there between chest and elbows, so we say. But also recognizing that there are just in general connections, getting used to identifying these. Hands down to your sides, and then winding back. All of this still feeds into your awareness, your intentions. And in particular, as we become more experienced in these movements, we can sort of get past the external choreography and begin to feel much more what's happening within our bodies. And they become the dominant move. You may still feel it here as your hands turn palm forwards, like a kind of opening across the chest. I'm exaggerating. And then reversing that. And eventually, rather than your arms creating the movement in your chest, if you can focus your intention correctly, encourage your chest to expand and get it to sort of generate the energy to rotate your arm. Bringing your hands around, still a rotation in the shoulders, so still, you may feel a little bit more, I feel a little bit more inside my body than as well. And then back the other way. Take your hand trace. Thinking of your pelvis, think of it as being like the bones at the base of the pelvis, like the blades of a rocking chair. Tilt forwards with an intention to drop your weight into your feet. And then that compresses your legs. You let the legs expand, pushing you back on. As you do this, imagine somebody sitting behind you, just taking hold of your belt. So as you go forwards, your hips are dropping back, and they also help to bring your head and shoulders up. And then your hips are going back as your head goes forwards. So there's a lengthening, an extension through your back, your spine in particular. And as you come up, there's a contraction. And that also makes a contribution to bringing your head and shoulders up. So one way or another, there are mechanisms within the body that mean that we don't have to strain in our shoulders, our neck, our head, just to come upright. You may find that you're still doing it. But again, we can get to the top of the movement, we can let the shoulders through. So we get this lovely sort of open quality to the upper part of our bodies in that top position, not straining the upper. Letting gravity flow downwards through our body and feeling the flow, the movement upwards as a result of that. Then turning slightly, so the more of your weight goes into the leg that you're moving towards. This will be labeled as the full leg. The leg fills up with the weight. So try and feel that your weight drops into your foot and then comes up through your calf and into your thighs and then empties out again. And then in the other direction. And then going forwards, turn a little bit. So you bring the weight to the opposite leg. Coming back, bringing the weight to the hip behind that leg, turning to go across into the other hip. Feeling again that actually that becomes an internal movement. Imagine if you had a bowl of water and you started to just rock it or move it around in the way that you're moving your pelvis around. The water would start to slosh around in the bowl and it would build. The energy would build. And eventually you'll get water all over the floor. Go back the other way. That last bit, slightly flippantly, and as it was expressed, is actually really important. What you don't want to do is go, oops, out of the chair. So still be aware as you go around of these points in your feet, your hips, where you really settle in. Coming back to the center. Then raise one leg, push it out, put the heel down, lower the toes. Before you bring the foot back, we plant the foot. Now, if you're a gardener, you'll know better than I do, really. If you're going to say plant a seedling in a pot or in the ground, you dig a hole, put a seedling in, you shovel the earth back in, and then you gently press the earth down. And in the same way, the same kind of gentleness, pushing your foot into the floor and then come back. So we plant the foot and just give ourselves a moment to appreciate that sense of connection through the foot to the ground. And then back, and then on the other side. These are all aspects of Tai Chi, fundamental principles of Tai Chi that we want to try and maintain through all of the exercises. The exercises are quite challenging, and what they do is they distract our attention. We could sit here all day just thinking about hips, feet, and so on and so forth. But it wouldn't necessarily, but it probably would, but it wouldn't be as useful to you when you go into your daily life. When I talk about the intentionality of this, with these aspects of Tai Chi, it's a subconscious intentionality. And what happens in my experience is that we get to know when we've got them, because sometimes we don't have them. So sometimes you realize I'm not very rooted. I am holding tension in the body, and then we can learn to sort of release that tightness to come back to the ground, and so on and so forth. And so you could argue that what we've just been through really is what we're practicing Tai Chi for. The rest of it is kind of challenging our ability to do that. So hands at your sides, and start by moving your weight forwards, and as you do, rotating your arms, and if possible, feeling that movement in your chest and upper back, and then just reversing. Arms hanging directly down from your shoulders with this exercise. Remembering springiness, compression and release in your legs as your weight moves, and in your hips and lower back. That extension and contraction through your back and your spine. Basic components of the movement that are finally expressed in the patterns in your arms. So if we can manage that, we'll start to get that sense now. Again, going back to the feeling of the water in the bowl, same sort of feeling can build in the upper part of your body. It's like the water flows forwards into your chest and your belly, and then back into the back, hips, and moves you. It's quite a powerful energy, quite a powerful movement when it starts to build. And yet at the same time, like water, quite kind of soft and pliable. And then leaving your hands facing backwards, pushing them past the neck. Now the arms swing out a little bit. So as you settle in your feet, what's going to happen is, we'll show you one arm here, settle into my feet, and as I do, my arm swings around. I move my weight back, settle into my hips, and the arm swings through. What I don't want to do is to lead with the arm. So we're learning to recognize those basic principles, to recognize them within the body, not just as a kind of external exercise. And then to try and just develop those, to cultivate those as part of the natural way of moving, producing the energy to move the arms. So in many ways, a reversal of how we might start doing the movement in our first class, or and then rolling the ball. Very aware of that push up from the feet. Feel of expansion in your belly, in your solar plexus, in your chest. Like a wave coming up underneath your arms, lifting them up gently. And as your hands come up, your elbows begin to drop down, giving you this circular movement. And here, as I come up, here, and then elbows drop. The first part of this movement back and up, if you think of maybe the first third, is actually just a pull in on my arms. And only then, when I've got that sense of a rising energy, do I, in a sense, allow my hands to come up. So I go from here to about here. As I go back a little bit more, I feel an expansion in my belly. That could raise my hands a little bit more. And as I settle into my hips, my elbows drop, and that brings the hands in. You can think of it in those three stages. One, just pushing down with your feet, doing that, drawing your arms up. Two, just a little bit higher with your arms, settling in through your hips. And three, elbows and then hands. So it's a bit like a seesaw. You get to about here, and it's your hips dropping that help to bring your hands a little bit higher. Indeed, your shoulders a little bit like pushing down on one end of a seesaw. The more we can use those mechanical ideas to reduce the amount of effort, to change the style of effort that we're putting into creating the movement, maintaining the exercise, the more we'll begin to appreciate, in my experience, what's happening within the body, small changes, and this lovely sense of an energy. And then Pigeon Spread's experience. Said in Chinese medicine that our energy follows our thoughts, and our body follows the energy. We could rearrange that a little bit in terms of Tai Chi, because rather than think of it as a linear thing, think of these three aspects of the art: body, the physical aspect, mind, the awareness and the intention, and then the movement itself, the energy, all working together and interact. This is the trinity of Tai Chi, the three strategies. This time, leaving your hands in line with your hips, but your elbows still going out. Now it becomes pushing away. Again, I'll show you from the side. Come back. Your elbows will go out a little bit. As you start to go forward, you rotate your arm, drop your elbow down, and the movement pushes your arm forward. You're not trying to lift your arms. I'm not getting to here and then trying to lift up. It's that natural curve in that my arm combined with the energy pushing my arm forwards. That means that our hands curve upwards. As long as I've got the shape, that will work. If I wanted to do this without my hand coming up, I would have to add something to the movement, which would be to straighten the elbow. But I don't want to do that. So again, rather than straining to lift your arms, have this intention that you're going to let your body and the movement, the energy, do the work for you. pushing wave. Do one more of these. And then from here, just let your hands straighten a bit, roll your fingers into a hollow fist, coming back, elbows coming in towards, but not behind your hips. Go forwards and just turning your hands, palm down. A nice loose fist, you should be able to get your finger there. So here we are, deliberately allowing the arm to straighten out through the elbow, but make sure you don't lock your hand. Sometimes the phrase following the path of least resistance is used in connection with Tai Chi. And also just a complete, I don't care what the movement is. You want to achieve the movement, but you want to achieve it with a minimum of strain. So the effort that we make is a different type of effort than the one that we often assume that we need to make initially. Once again, this is something that I think we can begin to bring into our daily lives. Open your fingers, turning your hands out, coming back, not forgetting to get that feeling of dropping, releasing through hips and buttocks, and then pressing forwards in the same way as we did a couple of exercises. Coming back this time, when your hands come in front of your belly, turn them palm down, turn, ease forwards, and let that movement, push your hands out, swing across to the opposite leg, pushing yourself back into your hip and into the center, polishing the table. In the other direction. Your arms gently extending right into your fingertips and then contracting back. You may even find that spaces between your fingers open out. You can imagine what it would be like to use this movement to slide your hand over a table. The pressure would tend to flatten your hand out a little bit. Not tight, not strained. Just imagine that sense of a slight opening in the fingers and the palms of your hands. One more time. Now turn your hands palm up, a downward movement through hips, feet, pushing your hands up and the movement beginning with a downward movement rather than trying to lift your hands to produce the energy that pushes you up. This also helps you to ensure that you maintain your root, your stability, whilst you're beginning to move your arms, because it's easily lost. One more time. And then wild goose, same idea in hips, back, legs. One more time. Easing forward so your hands can just brush in front of your knees, come back into your hips, pushing up, expanding in belly, solar plexus, chest, and finally into your fingers. Again, your fingers spreading out just a little bit, heart in the plants. So that movement from the ground, filling your body, inflating your body, juicing the movement. And almost as though your fingers are just lengthening towards the ceiling. But notice there's still a bend in my elbows. I'm not straining to push my hands up. Lifting your hands drop down, and the next sort of movement upwards works on one side of your body, your elbow, drawing your fingers up, and eventually your elbow drops back down, sends the fingers up, and again a loose fist pull down. So dragon punch to start. When you finish that side, switch your attention to the opposite side, expanding all the way through that side of the body, and expanding and do one more of this on each side. Now back to moving both hands together, but that same feeling sinking into the chair, feeling the push up coming, expanding through the front of your body and your back, lengthening through your back, and then back. And then pushing out. Remember, one of the things that we're trying to do, and it's quite tricky because there's a lot going on at this point, but trying to make sure that there's a part of our awareness and really a part of our brain that is still aware of those really fundamental principles. And there's still, again, an intention to root down, to align, to release. Come around. And then extend one foot, put the heel on the floor, turn your hands palm forwards, upwards, fingers pointing forwards. These forwards, then you're going to scoop water up in your arms. A push from the foot that's still flat on the ground, contraction through your back, drawing you up, and then opening your chest. Send the hands back a little bit further, as though you're scooping the water up, throwing it back over your head. Remember those qualities, like things like the extension and contraction in the spine. It's quite a strong movement. It's quite difficult to come from this position to the upright position without stiffening up in your back or your shoulders, but it is possible. And then, again, a loose, hollow fist in your hands and grasping the tiger's ears. This is in a way the opposite. You go forwards, chest opens. As it starts to contract, it brings your arms around. But because you're angling forwards and your head is going upwards, the hands are projected upwards and pulled upwards, grasping the tiger's ears. And then we're going to do the same movement on the opposite side. Plant, One foot down below your knee, extend the other foot, planting the heel in. This extended leg, the knee's still a bit bent. Don't put pressure on the knee. Scooping the same, looking at the sky. And then change into grasping the tiger's hands. So hopefully you can begin to see how what's happening, particularly in arms and hands, but really all through the upper body, are movements that combine different proportions of those basic movements that we did at the beginning, the rooting, the extension, the contraction, transfer of the weight, direction from the center, along with an intention to make the movement. As you get more used to the movements, you'll remember the shape of the movement and your body will flow into that shape far more easily. Coming back. Rest your hands. Just again, remind yourself of the qualities of this basic posture, qualities that we want to keep with all of the movements as much as possible. Now, once again, rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck, shoulder, your arm, the other side, and the upper part. Belly, and your legs. And to help you get a little bit more circulation, but the feeling back into your legs, push your heels up. Working, particularly the calf muscles. And then circling around, feeling the movement back into your hips. And back in. Good. And then standing. One of the problems that we encounter, of course, is that we're trying to change the way that we stand, sit, move. And that can feel quite kind of tricky. It can feel quite threatening because you think, well, what's going to happen if I let go of my shoulders and so on and so forth. We've discovered in the chair that when we do that, the shoulders meet that inner structure. So you can do this holding onto a chair if that helps. In fact, there's one stage of this where I would recommend it. But no, I'm not going to do that. Just as you stand, once again, lift your shoulders up and drop down. And just concentrate on that feeling of dropping and what it's like to sort of let your shoulders drop in, sort of drop into the rib cage really. And then you're going to do the same thing with your hips. Just bend your knees a little bit, push up, and tighten around your hips and drop. This is where you might find it useful to hold on to the chair, because when you get used to it, when you drop, you'll be very accurate in where the weight is dropping. But to start off with, if you do drop the hips down and your weight's a little bit back, that's when you might find yourself stumbling around. So it's quite interesting. You can remove that possibility by holding on to something and just notice what's happening again in your back and your shoulders. And taking that a little bit further, push up, and this time come up on your toes. Oops. And then drop down. Feel the shaking going up through your back. Quite refreshing for the back. And showing us how when we can drop, once again, we get that sense of a movement and energy coming up through the body. The energy comes up from the ground, it seems. One more time. I'm going to get rid of the chair because otherwise I'm going to keep bumping into it, but feel free to continue to use it. So, doing the 3 exercises, standing versions of rooting down the wild goose and parting the clouds in a little sequence. But start by just once again kind of pulling up through your hips, dropping, try and have your feet directly below your hips. And this time, as your hips drop, just let your knees bend a little bit more. So you go down, bringing your hands around. So you're cradling the ball and pushing up, so rooting down in your body, growing out of the ground, contracting back in. The bottom of the movement, turning your hands out and going into the wild goose and down. And then hands crossing and parting the clouds. Go back to rooting down. Excuse me, I just need to get a drink. I've got something caught in my throat. So you cradle the ball. And it's an interesting way of doing these 3 exercises because you can start to get an impression of subtle changes within the body from one exercise to another. The patterns of movement, of expansion and contraction. In the first instance, it doesn't matter what those changes are. They're not always going to be consistent. Some will be, some not. But just training yourself to recognize these internal dynamics that we want to bring our attention to bring our intention to fuel the movement. And as you get more used to this, just trying to get a sense for which of those movements help the movement, which are useful, which would you rather weren't there? Can you find a way to, for instance, if you find that when you go into the wild goose, your shoulders are coming up, and what happens if you can drop your elbows down? Same thing with parting the clouds. So not every internal movement is conducive to the overall movement, but we can bring our intention. Intention would be, as we go into the wild goose, to not start the movement with the hands, to feel the expansion, pushing the elbows out, drawing the hands up, letting the elbows soften. And that helps to keep the shoulders down. If that doesn't work for you, you could try an image. Just imagine somebody gently pressing down on your shoulders so they're unable to come up, and give your body time to find a way of doing the movement without lifting the shoulders. You're surprised at how good your body is at doing that. Good. Now, one foot forwards. Keep the width of your step. You can see the background between my legs still. And begin to move from the ground. Notice whether you're inclined to lean forwards or backwards. It's a very common habit. It's one that we use in everyday walking. It's not necessarily a bad habit. It's not particularly useful here. Go into your back leg, releasing in your hip and your knee, getting a stronger feeling of the leg being compressed. It may involve your knee bending a little bit more, but not necessarily become stronger. And when you feel the push back up, the intention is for it to take you into the front leg. Same thing here. Back. Try not to strain around your belly and your lower back so that your pelvis can just hang and maintain its alignment with the ground. If you remember in the chair, to get the weight to move forward and backward, we were actively tilting the pelvis. So when when, for instance, and don't do this, but if I'm here, if I lean forward, look, my shoulders are now going forwards. So to maintain an upright stance, rather than straining in our shoulders, we let our hips drop back, we maintain the alignment of the pelvis, and then our shoulders and our upper body can just rest on that. All of these things are quite tricky. You may have noticed. They're all worthy of practice. And it's the regularity of practice that starts to make these things available to us. One of the reasons I offer very, very simple exercises like this, and that initial set of exercises that we did in the chair, is that they encapsulate really key principles. And it's the sort of thing, I mean, every day I take myself through processes that remind me of these very, very simple aspects of Tai Chi. And I want them to be there. I want to remember them during the day. Now, going into your back foot, just flexing the front. So your toes come up. Now, more of your weight will go into your back foot. Notice that I've turned my front foot out. And here, I push my back knee forwards and my heel comes up. So I'm now beginning to find the same alignment that I had before, but predominantly over one leg. So it requires a little bit more awareness, a little more precision in the movement. I want my head above my foot. I don't want it out here somewhere, because that begins to pull me forwards. And then eventually bring my foot in and plant the foot back. Put the ball of the foot down, lower the heel, press in gently, let your weight fall. Same thing here. So you maintain and you cultivate that contact with the ground. Good, and then change over. Just fixed step, not moving the feet, getting that feeling of filling and emptying. You could still work with that idea of planting that. Because what you could do, say when your weight's in your back leg, is just before you move the weight, apply that little bit of pressure, that gentle pressure downwards. And sometimes it feels as though the weight sort of follows on from that. And then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping through. So you go forwards or backwards, depends where you've got the space. Just taking a few steps, reflecting on this process of simple movement. And then changing direction. Planting the foot. Good, and shake out. So all well and good, but in our daily lives, we don't really kind of, we can't, we're going to the shops or if we're walking around the house, you know, we've got things on our mind, we're doing things. So once again, we want all of that to kind of slip into the background, not to disappear, but the sort of knowing that it's just in the back of your mind. I sometimes describe these things as being like the noise of the fridge in the kitchen. You could be standing in the kitchen and suddenly think, what was that? Because something changed. And you realize it was the fridge turning off. You didn't notice it consciously, but there was a noise there, but you noticed it when it went. So that can be quite useful. So what we're going to do, we bring the upper body into the movement. fairly complicated exercise in some ways, one that can easily throw you out. You move your weight into your front leg. So have your right foot forwards, go into that front leg, turn to your left and let that swing your arms out. Sinking into the right leg. Coming back, feeling the contraction in the upper part of the body, settling into the back leg, feeling the push up, expanding through your body. This is wind blows the wings. Expanding, contracting, expanding as you feel that sense of releasing into the ground. Remember that produces an upward energy. Again, not lifting your shoulders, not straining in your back or your arms, like a wave coming up underneath them, coming up through your body. Maybe remembering that to plant in the foot before you move your weight. Try that with your other foot forwards. Moving forward, settling down into the front leg, feeling the push up. Expanding, contracting, settling into the back leg, expanding, contracting. And we're going to combine this movement again with stepping. So you can either go forwards or backwards. I'm going to go forwards because I've got a wall behind me. I turn my front foot out, going forwards. As I turn, I push my back knee forwards. I bring my foot in, turn, just toes lightly on the ground, plant the foot, move forwards, turn, back knee bends, foot comes in. Now, if I'm comfortable with my posture here, next time I bring the foot in, posture's fine, so I raise the leg. I try and do that very smoothly in my hip. It could just be this. Then if you stiffen up in your hip to move the leg, then that will start to throw your pelvis out of line. This is dragonfly skims the water, releasing in your hips. I'm going to change direction. So again, my toes come up in the front foot and bring the foot in, maybe lifting. Take your time. And just bringing the feet down. So, go back to your chairs. Just to remind people, there will be no classes on the 20th or the 22nd of this month. So that's next week, there won't be any classes. But I've recorded this session. I'll put this session up on YouTube at some point. If you're looking for something to practice with. But for now, coming back to this posture and where those qualities again. Obviously, you know, depending on whether we're seated or standing or what we're sitting in and what activities we're involved in, we don't always maintain the same posture, but we always have this intention to cultivate these qualities. And intention is like an instruction that we give to the body. You know, it's like if if you've ever managed a team of people engaged in some kind of project, if you can give clear instructions, you can say, yeah, that needs doing, and somebody will go off and do it, and you know that it's that it's going to be done. But the instructions, the intention has to be clear. And our bodies are very good at responding to intention. They do it all the time. These unconscious, subconscious intentionalities that we have are there all the time. But we don't always keep these qualities. So the last exercise, embrace tiger, return to the mountain. For me, the mountain encapsulates many of these qualities: the quietness, calmness, spaciousness, the strength, the root, and so on and so forth. The tiger is just what happens in daily life. We get drawn out of this. So the intention here is to recognize when we get drawn out of it and to give ourselves a chance to come out. So hands at your sides, expanding upwards, feeling your arms getting heavier with gravity until eventually your elbows start to drop, drawing your hands around, and then in, and then finally settling down. Embrace tiger. Feeling what it's like to return to these principles, these qualities. One more time. And rest. Lovely, and just open your eyes. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching and joining in. I'll be back doing live sessions from the 27th of September, so next Tuesday week. Thanks very much again.